Chapter 8, Plans and Planning. Plans and planning are by and large at this stage of the cycle a copy and paste exercise. You'll have certain goals of the sort of documents you want to make, and you basically just take the stuff that you've made previously and you paste it into a template that suits the needs of what you're looking for. First, I want to read you two quotes that I think are relevant when thinking about the goal of a plan or the way to approach plans and planning, or this section of this. The first is, "No plan survives contact with the enemy." It's a quote from Helmuth von Moltke. The reality of writing a plan is you think that everything is going to go perfectly, everything will go according to plan, but in reality, generally things don't. Things go off plan, and certain things might be useful still in the plan, but something will happen that you don't necessarily anticipate. The second quote kind of informs why that's okay and why it's still okay to go through planning at all. The second one is, "Plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." So this distinction here is made between plans and planning. So plans, being the piece of paper that you've written, is useless, but planning, the process of making that piece of paper, is indispensable. That is a quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower. If you've made this plan, if you've gone through the exercise of getting to the point of having this piece of paper that you've made, then all the people that were involved in that process have a better fundamental understanding of what's going on. They probably have a better understanding of how the organization is structured. They probably have a better appreciation for the way emergencies occur. They just overall have a better grasp of the situation, period. That is very, very valuable. That person is able to have less panic in an emergency generally because they've anticipated some of this, and they're able to be more flexible and better informed when something goes awry that is outside of what you've planned for. The process of planning is incredibly important, and that's one of the reasons why I place some of the least emphasis on this particular section compared to others. Personally, I place a lot of emphasis on getting more people involved in the planning process and getting more people involved in generating the data, in running exercises and tests later on. And this is just kind of the thing that you do in between that creates documents people who are unaware of this thing can read. If you've never participated in this process and we're trying to catch you up to speed, you're creating documents for those people. Other than that, really, this is something that auditors like to read, and sometimes you'll have a regulator, a client, something upstream in the supply chain that wants you to show that you have something. This is a piece of paper to make them happy, but it's not where your value of this program generally is. The value of this program is everywhere else that went into making this thing. Okay, now with that in mind, there are a few different ways to look at emergency plans. Broadly speaking, there are two types of emergency plans. The first type of plan would be plans that are being used in an emergency. You intend for them to be read when the emergency is happening. The second type of plan would be something that you don't intend to be read during an emergency. Now, why is this important? Imagine you're a pilot and a plane is nosediving. A 300-page plan that you've never seen before is not practically useful because you don't have the time to go through it, to figure out what you're supposed to do. You need an answer now. Plans designed for use in an emergency are made for that type of situation. They're very short, they're generally very few words, they're very picture-oriented, an evacuation plan of picture go there now, that is your in-emergency style plan. Fight, flee, hide in the case of an active shooter plan of 1, 2, 3, pick one. Very simple, very straightforward. That's your sort of in the immediate emergency style plan. Very important sorts of plans to make. Those are the plans I tend to really, really like because not only are they something that's come from what you've designed, there's something that's practically useful in the event. They might be part of a response strategy or a preparedness strategy. They might be part of your actual solution. The long form plans, things that you're generally using for non-emergency situations, are really good for training and they're good for helping get people up to speed, but they're not the best. I don't find them very useful when someone's in a panic. Very often, I will see someone wants to do business continuity, and previously they've brought in a very large firm that they've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do one of these programs. And the firm comes in, they don't really consult people in the organization to the degree that I think they should. And they basically make a thing externally and say, here you go, here's your 500-page document. And then that document gets put on a shelf and no one reads it. That is a complete waste of time and money. Not only has the organization not been involved in the planning process sufficiently, so you haven't gained most of the value from this, that document is never being read. And when an emergency happens and they go reach for it in panic with all the dust on it, they're not going to know how to read it. They're not going to know what page is relevant. And they've probably never tested whether it even works, so they don't know if it's even counterproductive. Complete waste of time. If you're going to make a longer plan, something that is actually useful, what I usually focus on is a giant binder that's in well-indexed or well-separated collection of every plan you've made. So it's basically a one large plan of just, this is all the small plans, pretty much. One common example of that would be if you're doing an all-hazard-based approach, like when you did the BIA, you may have come across your critical resources and you may have said, okay, I have to create a how to do this job document for insert role when thing happens. So I need one for, HR director, I need one for IT manager, I need one for whatever. And then you have all of these different job titles and then what you expect for them to do. And every job title has its own page. If you have a large organization, this could be, 300 pages. This could be a very large collection. But what this is these are all one page or maybe two tops documents of, hey, you do this, here's your page. Hey, you do this, here's your page. It's a giant thing, but it's not one huge plan. In principle, it's a collection of 100 small plans that each get divvied out as necessary in an emergency. Very different way of looking at things. Okay, we want to make a plan. I go into a lot of detail here about different lengths and the sort of other aspects, but I think by and large this has been covered with the quotes and the spiel I just gave you. So what we're going to do now is over here on the side, we're going to provide some templates, example templates of things that we've used, simple templates. You can find them in the book, and we might provide links to these templates as well. We'll figure something out if need be so that you can just have access to them. They're in standard like Word format. The way this basically works is you've got red stuff, which is placeholder text. You'd erase that and put your own stuff in. You've got black text, which is you can just keep it as is. And then you've got green text suggestions for explaining the sort of thing that should go there. So it's a template you can read to try to kind of learn from and then erase and then use. When you have one of these templates, looking at the hazard specific one, for example, this is the sort of plan that you might make that came from that risk matrix. So you had that risk matrix, you identified the hazards and the things that you were really, really concerned with. You ended up getting to the continuity strategy section and or the incident management section or the incident response section. And you figured out sort of what our emergency contacts are going to be. And, for this risk, we're going to do this and this and this. This is your specific thing to that. So you have one point really on that risk matrix. This is a plan for that one point. Now you might have 20 of these if you've got 20 different points in the risk matrix, so they don't have to be very long necessarily, but they're very targeted. For that, at the start of a plan, you're going to have background and scope. You're going to have a title, but you're going to have background and scope. What is the context that I need to know for this plan, and where does this plan begin and where does this end? Are we talking about a plan that's just focusing on one building? Are we talking about a plan that is the whole company, etc.? This background or scope, you can pretty much just copy paste from your program design at the very start. You design this whole thing around that scope. It should be probably the same scope. That's straight of a copy paste lift from there. Purpose and objective. What are you trying to do with this? You can, once again, pretty much just lift this from your program design. what's the point of us doing all this? You can just copy paste that over by and large. That content's probably already in your program design. Plan maintenance. So how are we going to maintain the plan? How often are we going to review it, etc.? Once again, that's in your program design. So you just copy over, you lift it. You don't need to copy the whole program design, but you've probably got one line in there that says how often you're going to review this thing. Copy it over. You've already built that in. Next, you go over the team. So you have emergency contacts, the people that are the keepers of this plan. You have your standard, their name, what their contact is, their main contact, and their emergency contact if you need to reach them if the main contact isn't available. You might use their title, if not their name. Depends on what you prefer. But you basically have some sort of table with a list of that. This was all made in incident response. This was all made in Chapter 6. Copy it over. Definitions. So this sort of plan is going to lean on prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery fairly heavily because your strategies will kind of slot into one of those. If people don't know what those mean, then you might want to slot definitions in. Now, you may choose to put that in right after emergency context. You may choose to put that in at the beginning of the document. You may choose to put that in at the end of the document. Keep in mind, this piece of paper is a piece of paper that you're probably intending to be readable in an emergency. So this is not going more than 2 pages for sure. And in addition to that, the earlier something is in the document, the more likely it is to be read. So emergency contacts should not be at the bottom. Definitions, if you think they need them to understand what's going on, put them earlier. If you know what, frankly, they could just come back to them in a panic, or if they're not in a panic, more like, then put them at the bottom. But the higher something is on the page and the closer it is to the top of the first page, the more relevant and important it is. So keep that in mind with these. Space matters, time matters in a document like this that's intended to be used when things are time sensitive. So this is a long way of saying you can move these categories around based on what you think is more important to read right now. So we have the definitions of all those, and I've just put some of these in. You can take other ones from other parts of the book or other parts of these videos that we've talked about, or whatever definition works for you. If you define emergency a very specific way, so if it means this has happened, then okay, put your definition of that in. There's another specific sort of term that's really specific to you, that's in the plan, that a layperson would otherwise not know, then you might want to put that in there. That's that sort of thing. So after that, you have your plan activation. You have to put in the plan, when is this allowed to be activated? So how does that happen? What is the mechanism in which that happens? You know, this plan comes into effect when a fire alarm is pulled. Got it. Makes sense. Whatever. Decide what that is. That goes in here. That should come right from, once again, your Chapter 6 incident response. So that's copy paste. You already talked about that. Plan strategies. So what are we doing? So this could be, what do? You don't have to call it plan strategies, but basically this is the what are we doing section of this. That is pulled right from your Chapter 7 continuity strategies section, or your incident response, depending on how fast this is coming in. For example, you may have something in your life safety section or your deal with stuff or security section, which is a response strategy that you do in case of fire because of an evacuation. That might come from incident response. That would go slot in here. Otherwise, this is all Chapter 7. Like, just pull Chapter 7, copy paste, make it easy, move on with your day. This isn't a big deal. This stuff should all slot into your standard prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery. You're good to go. Okay. After that, you're done. That's it. That's a plan. Okay. This is all take template, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. It doesn't have to be complicated. And this could frankly be more comprehensive and easier to read than many 20+ page plans. Get to the what you need to know, discard everything else, it's not relevant. Okay? That's your standard hazard specific plan. You can just print these. Like you can make one every 3 minutes. Once you get good at this, you can just print them. You already did all the work before. Next we have vulnerability based or all hazard based. The one example we've given here is a building outage. Same thing, background scope, purpose, objective, plan, maintenance. Just grab it from program initiation. This is standard copy paste. The team, same thing, chapter 6, grab it, copy it over from your incident response. Definitions, same thing. You might have to also put in explanations for your job site or the location here, because very often with a vulnerability specific plan, you're talking about a certain building going down or a certain department going down. We're talking about something very specific. So you want to help further define that. Sometimes that's in definitions, sometimes that's in scope. With the template, you'll see it. Oh, yes, I do mention this. So a lot of these plans will incorporate when you're at work or not at work. How that is defined depends on the organization. So if you are a tradesperson that's working on a job site, you may be at work at a site that is another client's business. That is different than if someone is at work at their company's head office. So if the plan makes a distinction there, you should make that distinction. You may have a continuity plan for internet loss or loss of access to a corporate server. It could be an application level thing where it might affect you in the building, outside the building, or in general. That distinction is important in the plan if that distinction is important in your strategy. So just, this is more of that, focusing on a scope, keep in mind, try to really hone in on what you're talking about. Prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery defined. Same thing. If you're doing plans where those are relevant, where those terms are relevant, then make it so people know them. You can once again put that at the end if need be. Decide how the plan's activated. Pull that from chapter 6. Plan strategies. This is all the stuff you did in the BIA and then you did in continuity strategies. This is what are we actually doing about it. Slot it in as necessary and your plan's done. Once again, does not need to be complicated. Another thing that we've included here is task, job, and role-specific plans. So this is that thing that I was talking about where you have a insert director, whatever, insert manager of blank, whatever. You have your plan and you have an outline of do this and do this, do this. We'll show you a template here of sort of what that looks like and the sort of different categories you have and the sort of, do this, then do this, then do this, contact this person. So if you field promote or just throw somebody into this job, they're not completely lost and you can help kind of rebuild the organization when it's been massively disrupted. That's what we've given you here as examples. I think planning is in general pretty straightforward. If you've done everything before the planning, this part should not be that hard.